Let me ask you a question here. How many of you used your mobile device with maps to get back to the hotel or to get down to the Smithsonian? There you go. Do you still think mobile's not relevant for enterprise? Okay, I'm going to do my other usual warm-up exercise here, so no, it's all right, doesn't involve doing any squats. How many of you have 2 mobile phones or more with you today? Yeah, okay. Anybody not got a mobile phone? Okay. What does that tell you? It tells you that it is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. How many people got smartwatches? A few, okay? The rest of you should get them. So, it's not that they're particularly useful at this point, but you need to learn because this is the way that things are going. The interaction models are changing dramatically. So, let's start off with mobile apps, mobile interaction. Everybody's just going to think, oh, it's an app on the phone. And it's like, yeah, it's just another channel. So, classically, people building enterprise software are sitting at their desk and they've got 2 20-inch monitors and the only time they get up to move around is to go and get more coffee. This is why enterprise software is so bad, okay? Because they're used to these huge screens, like these ones down here, which are very cool, and there's no mobility. So people think about the apps being in here, but this is just the start. Now, I got into building mobile apps in 2004, before nobody'd ever heard of them. The interesting thing was that people back then said, nobody's going to walk down the street looking at their phone. Seriously. So yeah, I was starting a business doing this stuff and nobody's going to look at their phone. Well, what I'm telling you now is that we're actually coming back to the thing where we're going to have the phone in our pocket and we're going to have other interaction models because the phone is just one of many, many, many ways we're going to be interacting with software. So we've got tablets. This is a Pixel C. Lovely little device with a magnetic hinge on it, which is very cool. Smartwatches, virtual reality, and personal assistant. So that's Cortana. For people who don't know, Cortana is the Microsoft virtual personal assistant. These are new ways that people are going to interact with software. We are not going to sit down at a desk and look at a big screen and interact with boring forms. We are changing that world. And it's happening whether you want it to or not. If you are in an IT service and you're resisting these changes, and I'm guessing that everybody here is here because they're not resisting it, so that's a good thing. But IT will become a janitorial service if we don't respond to this. Janitors are really important people. They keep the building clean, they keep the lights working, the power get in the way of the janitors and you're in big trouble, but they don't have a seat on the board. If IT wants to retain an important role, it has to embrace this new model of interaction. And in order to do that, I forgot the last one, I always do that. This is a Bluetooth beacon. Very important little things. They're changing the way that we interact with the world around us. And in order to make the maximum value out of that interaction, we have to move away from this stuff. Programming's kind of fun for a while, and eventually you get tired of it. And then you want to find other ways of addressing it. We have such an incredible opportunity to address that we have to move away from that style of programming. We have to come across and come up with many other different ways of looking at the creation of software. We have to not immediately think, right, I've got to write 100,000 lines of code. We have to think, how am I going to paint a picture to deliver this? How am I going to do this more effectively, more quicker? That said, mobile is still the hub. How many people here on Facebook? How many people on LinkedIn? Lots of people, right. Mobile is probably how you interact with Facebook, and I'll bet most of you use Facebook as a means of contacting your family and friends to organize your social life. So you're using a whole pile of different apps there in order to have an efficient private life, but efficiency doesn't really happen. It means that in this busy, crazy world where we're traveling and doing all this stuff, we can still interact with our friends and do stuff, and messaging comes with us. So, in a social world, the mobile device is the go-to thing that enables us to contact all this stuff. Now, the same thing is happening for work. We find a lot of shadow IT, whatever you want to call it, rogue IT, people doing things themselves in mobile. And lots of IT services want to get rid of that, stop it. And then we even come across people who say, well, there's no shadow IT in my company, and the answer to that is, oh yes, there is. You're delusional. So anybody who thinks they've got no shadow IT, wake up. The reason people are using all of these tools is they want to have the same efficiency that they have in their social life with their work life. People don't use Dropbox because they want to leak data. They use Dropbox because it's efficient. It's fast. It gets the job done. Now, we're extending the world out there as well. So we're moving the phone in the pocket, moving out to all sorts of exciting, interesting ways of dealing with it. So smartwatches, wearables, all sorts. Those little Bluetooth things are Bluetooth earbuds, but they also have biometrics in them. So you can be listening to music and they are still monitoring your biometrics. So if you're working in a cold store in a supermarket, for example, if your body temperature goes down too low, it can raise an alert and say, please leave the cold store and warm up. Those are the Microsoft headsets, the HoloLens. If you've not seen any of the material around that, you need to check it out because that is going to be a major shift. A lot of Facebook VR activity based around the Samsung Gear VR. Lots of exciting things happening in this space. We're also seeing the explosion of the Internet of Things. Lots of silly stories around things like smart washing machines that tell you through an app that they finished the spin cycle or whatever. It's not really terribly useful, but it's coming. People are experimenting with that. A lot of very crazy things out there. But the world of work IoT is enormous. And our friend Baxter outside there, he should really be making cocktails. I agree completely. He shouldn't be doing that chemistry experiment. What a waste of technology. Anyway, our friend Baxter is a beautiful example of how we are taking software and making the real world do stuff. And we're going to increasingly see this as a core element of everything we do. We are smearing software across every possible surface and device. And we have to learn about it. So if you don't have any of these things, then you really need to play with some of them, go out there, buy them, get hold of them, have a lending library in your company. So lots of cool things in there. And what this world of connectivity, this world of contact, the right information on the right device at the right time in the right place. We're taking business away from the app, and we're creating new models of interaction. So out there, classically, we have siloed applications, and it's relatively easy when you're on a big screen with a browser to switch tabs or change applications and alt-tab between things. Trying to do that on a mobile device is a royal pain. Have you ever tried copying a serial number or a reference number out of one application and pasting it into another one? Horrible, isn't it? So, what we see is that companies start off by going, well, I suppose we'd better reluctantly let people have this one application. And then, of course, somebody else wants another application over there, and eventually you get more and more applications, breeding like rabbits across the whole environment. And eventually somebody realizes that actually the key element here is to bring information together from multiple backends and deliver them as a single application that does a job focused on a business task, not what it was connected to. So we don't, as a user, we don't really care what the back-end system is connected to. Okay? Yeah. We really don't care that the information is coming out of Oracle or SAP or whatever. All we want to do is find out what the customer record says. We find out what the student record says. We don't care where it's stored. It's like cloud storage. Unless you're a governance geek, you don't really care where those servers are. So we've seen this growth of these applications, and it's a very exciting set of layers here. And this is already very good, and it's already very challenging. And I hope that you're all going to be following the tracks on mobility today so that you can see how to take these multiple application-specific little chunks of focused applications sitting on top of the bigger ones that you have, But you need to be aware that we are building more layers on top. Watch applications aren't really there yet, but they're coming, and there's going to be a lot of very interesting things happening, alerts and acknowledgement. Imagine if you're working in a job that involves you wearing gloves, whether it's cold or dirty, and you have to go to a different part of the building, and your phone goes beep, you have to take your gloves off, come out and say, okay, so somebody spilt their coffee in the lobby, can you go and clean it up? Well, actually, that's really tedious because I've got to put my gloves back on again and everything else. Now, imagine that comes up in the watch and, okay, please go and clean up urgently in lobby. And you can go, yes, or no, I'm doing something else. Never take your gloves off. Same thing with headsets. Lots of very exciting stuff happening there. So, this being American, all cars are kind of important. I come from Scotland, so we have cars as well. I personally don't have a car. I tend to walk everywhere. Anyway, the car is becoming one of the most connected mobile devices. There's a lot of good reasons for this. A lot of people spend far too much time in their car with crazy waste of resource. So when people get into the car, your phone disappears. That's for safety. Okay? You shouldn't be fiddling with your phone when you're driving. So you're in the car, and the app connects into the car system, and it becomes your computing environment. It is an ambient experience. The car will talk to you. It can read out your emails. It already tells you directions of where you're going. It can tell you all sorts of things because it is a great way of interacting. Voice. So how many people talk to, say, Google Now or Siri? Yeah? They even understand my accent now, which is always quite nice. Voice interaction becomes hugely important because it's a different interaction style. And in the last couple of months, we've seen a lot of people talking about conversational user experiences. We've seen people talking about chatbots and all these kind of things. And what they are is they are layers on top of existing services which are driven by our interaction model. So we're interacting with these things in a way that is difficult to express for humans. It's difficult sometimes to create the user experience around them, so we're looking at alternative ways of doing this. So Beacon's a great example of triggering something. We walk into the room and it signs me onto the video conferencing center. There's a service running in London where people can the driver gets onto the train, and there's a Bluetooth beacon in the cab of the train that tells the driver the route that they're going to be driving that day without any paperwork. Nice system. And then we have virtual personal assistants layered on top of these applications. We believe very firmly that you're going to start to see app fatigue. The rate at which people install applications is slowing down. Already people use typically just 5 applications. So what we're really seeing is that people are saturated by sources of information. So the virtual personal assistants sitting on top of these services become the mode of operation because they can start synthesizing the application for you automatically. And this allows us to move into a world where we have lots of different devices that match the process. So we have a process flow that will probably kick off with somebody in a back office. It flows through a bunch of other devices and then gets stored in the server. So this is the model that we're very much seeing here with the Appian product, is you have the right process and the right device at the right time, and it's all part of the same structure. But what happens if something goes wrong? So the person delivering the job goes, well, actually, I've turned up to fix this piece of equipment, and it turns out it's a Model 5G63, and I don't have the parts for that. And it's not what I was told it was, and it's up a set of ladders that I need a scaffolding to get in to fix. So they can then raise the alert directly with the supervisor, who can then push it out to the manager of the service on their watch, and the manager can then say, okay, well, we obviously need to get somebody out there quickly and some additional people, and there's a whole bunch of other services get fired off. So we're starting to see how we are forgetting about the device. Who cares what device it's running on? Well, who cares? The person who's using it. But who cares from a development point of view? We don't really care anymore. We want to make sure that the information is available when you need it, where you need it. And that's Beacons again, where automated. So we are looking at creating process flows across devices. We're device agnostic. We don't care. And this is about enabling agility of business process. We talk a lot about agile for software, but this is talking about agile for business. How do we make our business process fluid? So here's an example, Ryder Trucking. It's about checking in and checking out vehicles and figuring out how badly damaged they were by the clients. So what could be more natural than a mobile device? For somebody who's sitting in the vehicle yard, checking in those devices, in the rain, in the cold, in the wind, paper is really not going to do it for you. So having a device that you just carry around with you all the time means you don't have to scan the data, you don't get it wet. The person can go around and they can take photographs of the device, where the vehicle where it's been damaged, all that kind of stuff. So we're seeing this process, the external elements fit very, very nicely onto the mobile device. But in the back office, the person processing the insurance claims or the exceptions, they're not out and about. They don't need a mobile device. That can stay perfectly well on the big screen in the comfort of the inside of the office and headquarters. But it's the same process. So in this example, they had a 50% reduction on rental transaction times. Now that's important for Ryder because they have an SLA around the length of time it takes for you to check out and check in your vehicle. It also had an enormous increase in the number of people filling in their customer satisfaction forms, and it had a 10% improvement on customer satisfaction just by making the staff use mobile apps. We're not talking about getting the customers to use mobile apps here, we're just talking about the staff. Quite an incredible process. Click. Now, maturity model. This is an informal maturity model, it doesn't have numbers. It's a little chart that says across the horizontal axis is maturity level, from low to high, and the number of organizations. I like to call the one on the left that says email and calendar, that's the BlackBerry zone. Not because people are actually using BlackBerries, but they're paying very large amounts of money for iPhone 6s and then treating them as if they were BlackBerries with email and calendar. Last year, this is pretty much where we were. Most companies are still going, well, it's a mobile phone, isn't it? Can't you use it for voice or something? What do you mean apps? What do you mean you want to put this service onto apps? What do you mean that process would be convenient? As we go forwards in a couple of years, we're going to see people moving quickly into a managed portfolio, towards a managed portfolio of applications. And in order to do that, you have a platform. And in order to have the proper bell curve that you would expect on a maturity model, which is somewhat like this, you need to have a mechanism whereby you are managing the delivery of a large number of small applications all integrated together on top of a big picture. So this is why you need a platform. This is why you need to start today, because that orange peak is where everybody who wants to stay in business has to be. Very, very important. And how are we going to achieve that? Because we simply don't have enough people who are developers. So right across on the right-hand end there, that's where you get the people who can do Swift and Objective-C, and they can sit down and write native applications. They're rarer than hen's teeth, and they're very expensive. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we push it down towards the left, towards the people who have the business skills. And there's a lot more business skills. So what we're talking about is making it easy for the people who understand the problem to deliver those apps without having to communicate it back up to the people who are going to build it, who understand the technology. So I'm going through at a rate of knots here because I don't have much time left. This means that we're addressing a continuum of developers. From one side, we have the no-code people, purely visual design, sit down and draw a chart, but occasionally they're going to need to go and get their coding buddy from the other side to make some widget for them. So it's very important to have this continuum, but most of the focus needs to be on the left. We also have where do I go back? We also have a continuum of users. You're probably thinking of users as people who sit at a desk. This is not the case anymore. People are using devices out and about. They're using them in the field. And that makes the interaction model change. Now, one of the fascinating things about mobile is that you've got big hands like me, you've got big fat fingers, you need to make the interface very simple. If you're sitting at a desk all day, you can use mouse and other things. So this is a different use case. You don't need to worry about small buttons being difficult to click. But you know what's really interesting is when you actually design something for use with fat fingers, your error rate goes down, and everybody migrates to the touch-enabled version, even if they're sitting at a desk like this lady is. So mobile drives simplicity because you have to make it simple, but the simplicity applies to everybody. And it's incredibly helpful to think about applications that are designed for people who are on the move, who are standing. Design your interaction models around that. I'm not going to go through all of this because we haven't got time. Make most use of the device. It knows where it is. It's got a camera built into it. That's the good stuff. Make the interactions short and effective and purposeful. That's all good stuff. Base it on your big fat fingers. But remember that it's kind of somewhat disconnected, and it's very important to understand how users work. How many of you actually go out and spend time with the users of your processes? Everybody's hand should be up. Okay? Next year, everybody's going to say that, okay? Promise? Yay, well done, like it. So, you have to go out and learn it. So this is the same sort of thing for people who are sitting. It's going to be a mix of long and short interactions. Mobile's typically lots of short interactions. Complex process, easy to switch, blah, 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 blah. But you still need to sit with them. It's important to understand how they work it. So, important for me is to understand as well, in those styles, what are we going to build? This is a little quadrant that we came up with working with our clients. This is called the value box. And across the bottom's usage, how often is this application used? And then on the vertical axis is the value of each transaction. So we have things up in killer apps, which is sales support, co-selling applications. Each transaction is very valuable, but it's quite frequent. So that makes it extremely valuable. So you do it a lot, it's high value, has to be good. Some things like field service are used very frequently but low value. Some stuff like approvals and board packs are used less frequently but are very high value. So you'll notice that all of these things are showing significant value. And then of course there's some things down there like the dead zone, like vacation booking, that gets used occasionally, has relatively low value, but it makes people happy and it's an efficient thing to do. So we see a lot of people doing those there. So use this tool to assess what you should be building first on mobile in particular. And as part of that, you need to think about designing for this new world of the digital mesh where you have dozens of different interaction points. You've got censored spaces. I think we're going to get a demo with one of the devices on here later from what I saw during the setup. Lots of context in here. Understand the context in which somebody's using it and offer up the appropriate information with the appropriate experience. Sorry about the speed we're going through here, but it goes a little bit accelerate to keep on time. So, Trojan horse. Mobile is an incredible Trojan horse. It's already in your enterprise. Use the fact that it's there to drive digital transformation, cultural transformation. Get people to understand that mobile isn't just about the mobile device. It's not the phone in your hand. It's about changing the way your business works and how you build the software for it. We see mobile as being an incredible transformative technology for things like cloud technology, no-code development, for process focus, for employee engagement, for client engagement. These are all things that are not necessarily company imperatives, but they should be. And mobile gets it in the door and gets people engaged because you have to. So use mobile as your lever to get digital transformation happening in your business. So how do you do that? First of all, don't think code. If you're a CIO or an application leader and somebody comes to you and says, I need an app to do X, Y, Z, don't think, well, that's going to be 25,000 lines of C# or whatever. Think, okay, how can we deliver that in 24 hours? How can we do it with process? Get as many people engaged in building it. So, instead of thinking, well, we could do a process, think, how can I help the person who needs that app to build it themselves? The citizen developer. How do we make the citizen developer build things? And make sure that when they're built, they work across all the relevant channels. Not everything needs to be in every channel, but think about how you deliver it. And one of the key vehicles for doing that is the use of microservices, APIs, so you're building on top of a layer. And then that softens the edges. We're talking about creating fluid applications that enable us to offer up services to employees and clients in a very, very simple manner. And this is what's going to drive your digital transformation. So, go out and do it. This is an amazing opportunity. This is a once-in-a-lifetime transformation. We are really about breaking open the traditional IT approach to things and becoming flexible, agile, and supporting business success. So, thank you very much.
I'm supposed to
come up that side, yes.
Got in trouble last time for using the wrong stairs.
Yeah. We're bad boys.
Yes. Rebels.
We're the rebels, yes.
So, just a couple of questions while we have a moment. Thank you for that. That was very helpful. You talked a lot about new channels and new layers on top of the traditional mobile stack.
Yeah.
And I left my mobile phone down, so I hope you don't chastise me too much for not having my phone with me. But we've heard a lot in the news lately about missteps with these things, with chatbots going awry and saying horrible things, and virtual reality giving people motion sickness. You know, how do you look at that landscape, and what advice do you have in terms of what's the most promising next layer that was relevant to enterprise business process?
Well, I think that chatbots are a good way out, so I wouldn't worry about them too much. Interestingly, there was a new release earlier this week of something that's actually very much better than that. The interesting thing I would say about, what was it called? Kik? No, that's not right. The Microsoft chatbot that went wrong.
The Team. Yeah.
The Team, yes. The thing that was interesting about that was it actually was a success in the sense that it learned. But it's very much out there. So what would I say for enterprise today is to look at building the applications that deliver the highest value, which sounds kind of trite and easy. So using the value box, look at the opportunities to deliver things and then validate them. And validation, I mean, talking about missteps, interesting. There's a lot of stuff you can do to check that the process is being followed properly because you have the device in somebody's hand, you can tell where they are, you can tell what it's doing. So you can use a lot of extra information that you don't have on a desktop device in order to validate that the person's doing the right thing. And testing, that's always a good idea. Sometimes you think that mobile is the world that people that test forgot. So yeah, you need to test it in situ.
So I was intrigued by your notion of mobility as a Trojan horse to inject simplicity back into enterprise applications.
Yep.
I wonder if you could elaborate on that a bit, since simplicity has been a core theme of this conference.
Well, the classic thing when IT people are building a system is that they will sit there and take all of the possible imaginable requirements and then want to deliver all of them at once, rather than adopting a lean startup approach, a lean startup minimum viable product. We all know the story. So the key thing is about delivering small chunks of functionality and understanding them and validating them with users. Now, bringing in the users as early as possible becomes a very important step with that. So you may be out there designing a system for use by a nurse, for example. Do you really know how nurses do their jobs? So you want to work with them from the beginning, and you need to release small pieces, update it regularly, and keep working with them. So classically, IT would go, well, we know how nurses work. We're going to sit down, we're going to talk to the nursing manager, and the nursing manager is going to write out the requirements, and we're going to build this and ship it to them. And then people are going to use sheets of paper to walk around the wards, recording their notes, and then put them into the application later because it doesn't do what they actually want. So it's about continuous validation, continuous integration, continuous deployment.
So a lot of our attendees here have talked a lot about the interaction between business and IT. How do you see mobile application development changing that dynamic?
Well, it completely blows away the division in many ways. This is where our concept of bimodal comes in very nicely, because bimodal is about ensuring that you do the things that have to be done in a solid manner solidly, and the things that you do dynamically in a dynamic manner. It's about ensuring that you're providing the right support. So what does IT do? IT keeps the lights on, it makes sure that everything is backed up, it means that things are available, it is in compliance with all legislative requirements. Doesn't necessarily deliver applications. So what I see IT going forward's role is providing a platform that enables the business users to create what they need, And the business users are going to come back occasionally and say, well, actually, I need something else. Can you do this for me? So it's very much a partnership and working together. So all the stakeholders should be involved in the process from the get-go. You shouldn't just silo things. And continuous delivery is such a cool concept. Engaging with people and getting the feedback. Analytics is very important, monitoring how people use it. Lots of things in the DevOps space that help keep those two things connected, which might not be obvious. And the other thing is educating business about how to specify things and the art of the possible. One of the things I mentioned there was having a device library so that people can actually experiment with them, so that we're very much seeing the learning process for the users, the internal users. How can a business person know what they could do with a tablet if they don't have one that they can play with? Maybe tablet's a bad example, watches, headsets, whatever it happens to be. But it's about this simplicity element. It's about paring things down to the minimum, delivering just the minimum you can get away with, and then adding only what's necessary through the life of the application.
So something attendees may not know about you is that you're also a published author. You have a number of novels available you can get on Amazon. And in your fiction, you always inject some sort of technological theme. I would even go so far as perhaps to call it tech-noir. Does the fiction, do you think, inspire some of your research work, or is it really more inspired by your nonfiction?
I think it's very important to have a view of the world of where you're going and to use creativity. It's not about the code, it's not about what you're building, it's about how it's going to be used. And the principles of the sort of tech-noir aspect is, yes, everything can go horribly wrong, but then you can fix it. And technology doesn't exist in isolation, and I think that's the key message. If we're looking at the future, and when I said we have a big opportunity, I really mean that. The opportunity today is enormous. And what we're doing is building the foundation for that future. So science fiction is actually a very interesting way to look at where we might be. How many of you have watched those videos of the SpaceX rocket landing and gone, it's like Tintin, it's like Buck Rogers, it actually lands with a rocket out the back. So, science fiction sometimes gets it right, even though science might have said that it wasn't right. So I would really recommend that you think as futurists, that you can all be your own departmental futurist or whatever you want. Think actually, there's an interesting concept, there's a good way of expressing it. Think in logarithmic time. So, yes, we've got things to deliver this week, we've got things to deliver next quarter, next year, next 5 years. Now, we're not building the things that are 5 years and 10 years out, but we're building the foundations and the understandings for it. Yes, it's fiction, we've no idea what's going to be happening in 5 to 10 years, but isn't it fun to speculate and think today how we can enable that process of change starting now? When all the walls around this meeting room become screens that we can project stuff onto, or the tabletops become active, how do you use that? How would your business get value from that? Interesting things to think about. Take some time to speculate. Take some time out from reading all your email and maybe come up with something that gets rid of the email and solves the problems on its own, chatbots. But yeah, fiction is incredibly important because we're building the future, so we're writing our own future. And that is not something that many people can say. Most people are sitting following a chain that has been set down for them. We are writing our own destinies. Now that sounds very pretentious, but it's actually true. We are the people who are creating that future that we're going to live in. So let's make it a good one.
It's an inspiring message. So another round of applause for our guest, Richard Marshall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.